Hi, I'm Claudine Wong with KTVU Channel 2 News. Welcome to a forum of candidates running to become the Area 2 representative for the Contra Costa County Board of Education. Area 2 includes Crockett, Hercules, Lafayette, Moraga, Orinda, Port Costa, Rodeo, and parts of Alamo, Concord, Martinez, Pinole, Pleasant Hill, Richmond, and Walnut Creek. The Board of Education establishes policies for the programs the Office of Education administers. Included are special education, career development, and educational opportunities. Today's forum is sponsored by the Contra Costa Elections Division, Contra Costa Television, the League of Women Voters of Diablo Valley, and the League of Women Voters of West Contra Costa. We are recording these roundtables here in the studio of Contra Costa Television. The candidates are Ditto Clark and Sarah Butler. We drew lots before the show to determine the speaking order. So we will begin with Ditto Clark. And just tell me your priorities. When you look at this seat on Area 2 on the board, what are your hopes for it?
My hopes are to have education be as great as it can be for every child. And when I was a local public school student here, the idea was one size fits all, and I never felt it fit me. So it's very important that we create education that works for every child. I was an at-risk student who didn't learn to read until she was in 4th grade. I dropped out of high school, but then I graduated from Diablo Valley College, which is the land of opportunity, and then I graduated from the University of California, San Diego, and Georgetown Law School. So even though I struggled with public school, I was able to grab educational opportunities at Diablo Valley College.
All right. And your thoughts on where you see for the future of the Board of Education for Contra Costa County?
So the Board of Education of Contra Costa County, as you mentioned, has some very specific roles. But the reason I am running and what I think is important is to always keep in mind the education of all students across the county. There are students that the County Office of Education is directly responsible for, and there are also the 18 school districts in the county that the Board of Education and the County Office of Education have certain oversights and program support for all students. So I want to make sure that all students have the best education that is possible across our county and underneath the County Office of Education.
So I want to ask you how good of a job you think is being done right now. Contra Costa County is so diverse in varying levels of economics and societal factors, and even within cities, you know, there's a lot of debate over equity among elementary schools and things like that. How do you think the county is doing right now? I mean, what grade would you give it in terms of providing an equitable education for all students?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think the county is doing an adequate job. I think there's a lot of room for improvement. My background, having gotten involved in schools, and I was previously on the school board in Orinda, and I was on, before that, I was on the Ocklawnee's Fiscal Advisory Committee, the Budget Committee, and also the Strategic Planning Committee, Parcel Tax Oversight Committee. So that budget-ish area is an area that I think the county could really improve on. They have a $73 million budget for the county office, and I'm aware that the community day school had a deficit. So a sizable deficit, approximately $1 million. So that's a big area where they need improvement, is to be more fiscally accountable. And also there are other areas such as providing better resources for all school districts.
So if I nail you down on an actual grade, what grade would you give?
I'd give them a C right now.
Okay. Ditto, the grade and why you think that?
I would also give the county schools a C, because even though some school districts are doing very well, such as Orinda, where Sarah and I are both from, many districts in Contra Costa are struggling, and more Contra Costa students are Hispanic than any other ethnic group. And I started college in Mexico City. I spent years reading to Hispanic preschool children in Concord. So I've been part, or a little bit a part, of the Hispanic community, and I care about this community. and they're not getting the opportunities they need to move ahead in our culture. So I particularly want to help Hispanic students get good educations.
So how do you balance, if you're Area 2 and you have the constituents voting for you in Area 2 saying, this is what we want and this is what is important, how do you balance those requests with also making that equitable and saying, well, I know that's what you want, but if you're talking about Area 2 and maybe the La Orinda area that has more resources than another area, how do you balance that out for the greater good?
That is a good question. Every student matters, and even though the La Orinda districts get less money from the state, they get disproportionately more money from the community. Many communities in Contra Costa don't have those options. They don't have a lot of wealth in their community. So we have to find other sources of money to enrich their curriculum and their individual attention and their opportunities for each one of their students.
Where do you think the best sources of funding come from?
We certainly need more from the state, and if possible, more from the federal government. And if we can create third resources, grant money or other sources, we need to do that also.
I turn the question to you then, in terms of balancing Area 2 voters saying, okay, I voted you in because these are the concerns I have for my area. How do you balance that out? And I'll let you also address other funding sources.
So that's a very good question. There is some disparity across the county. But I just want to remind us the role of the county board isn't to oversee, well, there is a role of the County Office of Education to approve the budgets of every school district and to make sure that they are fiscally responsible and doing good fiscal planning. So there is that role in the county office. The county board itself only approves the budget of the county office, but a big area where that plays in is the LCAP, the Local Control Accountability Plan. And the county office does approve LCAPs across the county, and that's a place where there could be a lot better communication and resources for districts in doing that, and that's an area where getting funds to the district where they need to spend it is really important and can be outlined in the LCAP.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Let's talk about another big issue for parents, safety in schools. And if you had to give that a grade and how we're doing and where you think our biggest improvements can be countywide to say, can we do something better? Are we doing enough? What's your response to that?
We can always be doing more. School safety is #1, has to be a big priority. Every student needs to feel safe and supported in their schools. We shouldn't have problems of school safety. However, we all live in the real world and there are issues that come up at times. So your question, I think, was how can we improve safety across all school districts in the county? That's an area where the county office could provide better resources to all school districts, even though they aren't directly responsible for most of school safety that a school district does. Having been on the board of a school district, I know that's an area the school district does. But the county board, the county office of education rather, could provide those resources. And also another area is facilities. The county office does have the role of doing the that's the Williams Act facility inspections for school districts, and an area where we should be working.
Do you think they should provide those extra resources, and do you think enough has been done? And if,
Absolutely, they should provide the resources, and no, not enough has been done. They should be doing more, especially in this day and age, for not only general school safety, but also in the Me Too era for all of that sexual harassment and information on that.
Got a grade at the top of your head?
Oh, I'd say a C again.
Ditto, do you agree? Is this a C grade?
I would also say C, but there are some things that we're doing that that I'm glad about. Betsy DeVos wants to arm teachers. We're not arming teachers. I think that would endanger students and is a terrible idea. There has been some bullying in local schools, and I want to see more restorative justice to protect the bullied and to teach the bullies to not act that way. And sexual harassment, we need to address that. There's lots of aspects of safety that we've just begun to cover. And the idea of no tolerance for weapons in schools, that idea has to be administered with reasonableness. Because if a kid brings a pocket knife, that may or may not be a danger.
Sarah mentioned some of also what's the district's responsibility, where the county steps in. Where do you think the county steps in on those issues versus letting the districts decide this is ours?
It's primarily a district issue, and the County Board of Education is not there to micromanage districts. It's there to support districts and help districts and be a resource.
Do you think there's a good relationship between the county and the districts in order to have that kind of symbiotic relationship?
Well, generally, yes. But with respect to some County Board of Education members, they need to keep in mind their jurisdiction, and not all Board of Education members are doing that.
Would you agree with that take on it in terms of the separation and the also importance of working together?
Yes, I agree. There is a difference between the county board roles and the district roles, and it is, as far as working together, did you mean working with districts or working together?
Do you feel like everyone's working together towards the common goal? Do you think it needs to be more separate? I mean, how are we doing in terms of, trying to reach that end?
I think there should be more working together in terms of school safety, providing resources to all school districts. School districts need support, and providing really adequate school safety is not easy. It's difficult, and when I just want to mention, when I was on the Orinda School Board, I think Ditto mentioned students' suspensions or expulsions or something triggered my mind regarding that. And when I was on the Orinda School District Board, we had a number of suspensions in one of the schools, and I pushed for our board, and this is why the board level information is really important, to review those discipline policies and create a climate of supporting students and not just suspending students. And that's something that the board needs to do at the county level as well, and do a better job of. All their board policies have not been updated the way they should, and that's a really important role for the county board members and the board overall.
Sure, go ahead.
The County Board of Education is largely an appellate body. The legal role is so great that board members, much of the time of the board members, is deciding appeals of suspensions and expulsions, charter school applications, school district boundaries. And in my capacity as an attorney education advocate, I think I'm ideally situated to help the board members understand legal processes.
And how it goes from there. Let's move on to...
Can I follow up on that too, though?
I'll give you a 30-second rebuttal to that.
30-second. I just want to say, as a Orinda School Board member, I went through all of the California School Boards Association Masters in Governance training. They train you about all those issues, judicial and appeals. That is an important role of the county board. Unless you have training in being an attorney is great, but being on the school board, you don't have to be an attorney, because attorneys can specialize in many different areas, and unless you're an education attorney, you're not necessarily specifically trained for that, whereas I went through 4 years of training with the California School Boards Association.
Okay.
But the board does have on retainer a large number of outside law firms for specialized legal issues such as charter schools, special education.
Yes, and we do have legal counsel, and I understand that I want to let you guys kind of hash this out, but I don't want to spend the entire time on this issue. So if we can, you can maybe include this in your next answer if you want to. I'm going to let you kind of take that and then go into charter schools as well. You mentioned that, gave me the open door to talk about charter schools and how you see their role in the county and maybe benefiting the children of the county. And if you want to use that minute to talk a little bit more about legal advice for the board, you can do that as well.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, charter schools?
Yes.
Charter schools are a hot issue, and they have pretty much bankrupted the Oakland school system. They have a lot to offer. They do inspire some students, but they drain resources from the public schools. And I think there's a place for charter schools, but not at the expense of public education. Both schools take special ed students, but public schools take more. And that special education students take a lot more resources, and more resources than they get from the government. And so when the public schools take disproportionately more special education students, that's much of their resources have to go there. So I want to advocate, my two priorities for charter schools are to hold them accountable to the state standards and to reform state law to make charter schools an asset to public education. And that would probably require more funding for both, but I would also like to see more cooperation with both.
All right, and your thoughts on charter schools?
My thoughts on charter schools is that, as Ditto said, and I agree with her on this, there is a place for charter schools when there isn't the opportunities that every student needs in the regular public school. With that being said, of course, when a school district turns down a charter school, they often appeal to the county board. And so as a county board member, I would be reviewing a charter application, and I would review it according to the requirements in education code. And I would be looking for accountability. How is that going to improve situations for a student? I agree with everything Ditto said about it takes resources away from districts. That is a big concern in many districts. And I also want to say, regarding the legal issue, that's where you, as a county board and a county office, you can get legal advice on charter schools, just like everything else. And I just wanted to lastly comment on Ditto's previous comment about attorneys. Every school district has attorneys available, and you have to stay out of legal problems. So.
All right, we are out of time for that question. I want to move on to letting you guys also define yourselves in this race, and what makes you stand out from your opponent in terms of when people look at the ballot and say, you know, Sarah Butler stands for this, Ditto Clark stands for this. I'll let you start.
Well, I think the most important thing for any candidate is values. I think Ditto and I probably share a lot of similar values. I think what makes me stand out separate from Ditto is that I have the experience of having been an education advocate for years, 15 years, as my children went through, and beyond in the legislative committee, the PTA legislative committee, and I have experience on the Orinda school board as a board member, and the school board training that Orinda School Board through the California School Boards Association offers. And that training helps you understand the role of the school board member and the superintendent and working together as a governance team. And actually having done that gives me a different perspective and stand separate.
And Ditto, when so people see your name on the ballot and say, who should I vote for, what do you think defines you as a candidate for this race?
I am an attorney education advocate. I lobbied the state legislature for 20 years for the University of California budget. For years, I tutored Diablo Valley College minority students and taught handicapped children to swim at St. Mary's College, and read stories to Hispanic preschool children in Concord. So I've been volunteering for education for decades. And I had a successful legal career where I litigated successfully at every level of court in the U.S., including the U.S. Courts of Appeals and the U.S. Supreme Court for the U.S. Department of Labor. So I have a very strong legal background and a strong volunteer education background.
And we touched on this a little bit earlier when we talked about funding and the schools and moving ahead in terms of, you mentioned grants. When you look at state funding and what might come down the pipeline and what might not come down the pipeline, what do you think the biggest hurdle is in getting teachers the resources they need, even getting teachers hired, because it's hard to find teachers now, and I see all incentives being offered at job fairs. What do you think the biggest hurdle, and how do you overcome it?
From the perspective of the state legislators, the biggest hurdle is that the state budget is almost entirely consumed by mandates. There's not very much discretionary spending to add extra money to education. So we do have to change the system. For example, with reforming Proposition 13 to make corporations pay their fair share of property taxes. A lot of corporations are paying the property taxes that were required in the 1970s when Proposition 13 was adopted. Meanwhile, almost all homeowners are paying much greater rates. Corporate properties should be reassessed so that they pay their fair share, so that they can contribute more to education. And we need other funding sources as well.
Okay. I turn that question to you in terms of when you're saying, yes, let's help, let's do more. How do you overcome those hurdles, and how big of a hurdle do you think it is?
The hurdles of funding we're specifically referring to. So I have been part of the PTA legislative team for a dozen years or so in the Los Trompas Creek Council area. We have written thousands of letters to legislators in the past, gone to Sacramento many times myself. And so more funding from the state is the most important thing. California is 47th in the nation in terms of per pupil spending, so we definitely need more funding for education. As Ditto mentioned, this Prop 13, it's commonly referred to as close the loophole. Funds for that corporations are not taxed at the same rate, and many have very low tax rates, and there's that effort to reform just that part of Prop 13, keeping residential property taxes the way they are, and taxes for small business. But corporations would be different. That is something that would, it's really important to get more state funding, but there are other avenues as well. I agree, we need more funding for education.
All right, we've got about 45 seconds left before you guys make your closing remarks. So I want to ask you, when you're talking to folks out there in a quick 20 seconds, do you find that people are content, or frustrated? Where do you find the emotional scale and satisfaction level?
In general, or not just about schools? I think people are frustrated and not content, and they want change. Yeah.
Are you finding the same thing when you're talking to folks, whether it be about schools or in general right now, in terms of do they want to see change? Do they want to think we're on the right track?
I don't think anybody is satisfied with local public education or charter schools. I love what Richmond did, getting megabucks from Chevron to send every Richmond high school graduate to college. We do have other big corporations who could do similar things in other parts of the county. And
so discontent, you see?
well, California is near the bottom in per pupil spending nationally. And it's critical that we raise the per pupil spending so that we can be competitive with other states, so that our high school graduates and non-graduates like me can do well in college anywhere.
All right. Thank you very much for that response. Thank you to our candidates for answering some of these very important questions. Each candidate is now going to have 2 minutes to make a closing statement, and we will start with Sarah Butler.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Butler, and I'm running for County Board of Education, Area 2. I'm an education advocate. I want to add here a little bit more about myself than you previously heard in the questions. I grew up in Berkeley and got a lot of exposure to a lot of different socioeconomics, demographics in growing up in middle school and high school, and I bring that with me. I went to University of California at Davis, studied environmental planning. I've been an advocate for education for about 15 years, as I mentioned, and I want to tell you that I want to improve education for all students, both at that is overseen by the county office and across all school districts in my role as a county board member and working with the county board and the county superintendent. I have priorities of more resources for students, school safety, transparency, fiscal stability, and accountability for the county office, budgets and LCAP, and advocacy for public education funding and resources. Those are all things that I think are really important, and I want to continue to work on in the role of County Board of Education. And I thank you very much for this time to speak to you today. For more information, please go to my website, sarahbutler2018.com, and I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone wants to contact me individually. Thank you very much.
All right. Ditto Clark, let's have your 2-minute closing statement.
I am Ditto Clark, attorney, education advocate. I'm also from Berkeley. I attended UC Berkeley when I was 3, the UC Berkeley Cooperative Nursery School. My family lived in North Berkeley, and the fog came straight in the Golden Gate right to North Berkeley. And my mother told my father that she didn't want her children to grow up without having seen the sun. So when I was 4, my family moved over the hill to Lafayette, the Sunshine Valley. So I grew up in Lafayette, attended Lafayette Public Schools, was one of the first high school dropouts at Campo Lindo High School in Moraga, started college at the Universidad de las Americas in Mexico City, where I learned my favorite fact in the whole world, which is that the word Mexico in the language of the Aztecs means in the navel of the moon. And that referred to the Valley of Mexico, not the city, not the country. And it's 7,200 feet above sea level, surrounded by very tall mountains. So I think that this word, Mexico, navel of the moon, is one of the most poetic country names I've ever heard. I think anybody who's Mexican or has Mexican heritage has a lot to be proud of with that beautiful name. I've never met a Mexican or Mexican-American who knew that, and I hope all Mexicans and Mexican-Americans learn that and celebrate it and are proud of that. So I'm proud to be a Contra Costan, where I've been since practically all my life, and I've been passionate about local public education for much of that time, and I'm running to advocate for education, to hold charter schools accountable, to reform charter school law, and to foster great education, good government, and community prosperity.
All right. Thank you very much for that closing statement. And that concludes our forum of your candidates running for Contra Costa County Board of Education Area 2 in the November 6th general election. Once again, your candidates are Ditto Clark and Sarah Butler. And for more information on the candidates, visit the website votersedge.org. To view this broadcast online, go to www.cocovote.us. I'm Claudine Wong from KTVU Channel 2 News. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to vote on November 6th.